Okay, so this is the Temple of Vesta in Tivoli, Italy. And it's similar to the round temples in Greece called tholos that we looked at when we were in the Greek chapter. And Tivoli is just east of Rome, and this is from the early 1st century. And the temple most likely honors the deity Vesta because most of her temples were round. And as you can see, there are Corinthian columns all around these columns. And the frieze featured garlands and ox heads, which was a motif that was also borrowed from Greece. And it's made of the local limestone called travertine, which is a high quality limestone. So it's unlike Greek tholi in the fact that it has this high podium that it sits on, which is very kind of Etruscan, and that it has kind of a narrow stairway that leads to the cella door. And this arrangement is Etruscan in nature and isn't really found in Greek round temples. If there were steps on a Greek temple, they would continue all the way around the exterior of the temple. In this one, in Roman, it is actually inspired by Etruscan. It does have Etruscan influences, and one of the influences is that it's on a high platform and it has staircase that is basically just right in front of the main entrance. Also, cement was used in the construction of this temple, which is kind of an innovative building material that was developed by the Romans. And obviously, in Greece, this temple would have been made of marble. So here's a restored view of the sanctuary of Fortuna Primigenia, looking north, Palestrina, Italy, late 2nd century BCE. And Fortuna Primigenia was the goddess of good fortune. And this was southeast of Rome, and it was built on a hill. So it has these levels called terraces that led up to the round tholos at its apex. So there's kind of a tholos up here, a series of different levels or terraces. And the building complex was most likely inspired by the terrace sanctuaries that were built in Hellenistic Greece. But this was built in the Roman style, in fact, because they used concrete. There's a lot of barrel vaults that were used to support the terraces and to cover the ramps leading to the central staircase. So we can see different vaults here all throughout the construction. So they covered the ramps leading to the central staircase and to support the terraces. So you can see the terraces are being supported by these vaults. And the central staircase has barrel vaults. Concrete was made of lime, mortar, volcanic sand, water, and small stones. And then it was poured, much like it is today, in wooden molds. And then once it was dry, the wood was removed. The Romans covered the coarse surface of the concrete with stucco, or sometimes they would face the concrete with even slabs of marble facing. And the concrete was less expensive than marble and even the local limestone travertine. So concrete was very much more affordable and it was a lot stronger. So it really revolutionized what they could do with their architecture. And so we get to see a lot more interesting forms happening with the concrete because it was so strong. And such a cheap material that they could do a lot with it. And even today, we still use concrete. It's a slightly different mixture than what the Romans used, but we still use, the basic concept of concrete. Definitely does come from Rome. So here's some different barrel vaults, or actually just concrete vaults that the Romans would use. So really, concrete allowed builders to use shapes that were previously unachievable in masonry or solid stone construction. So huge vaulted and domed rooms without internal supports were possible with concrete, and concrete allowed Roman architects to really focus on the interior of the space without having to worry about the strength of the walls as much. So the focus really shifted from the outside walls to the building's interior volume. So that's kind of how things change with the advent of concrete. So barrel vaults are also called tunnel vaults. We can see this is what a barrel vault looks like. And it's basically the extension of a simple arch. And there's basically these two parallel walls that run next to each other, parallel, and then connecting them is kind of a semi-cylindrical ceiling, or this arch. So that's basically what a barrel vault is. And before concrete, barrel vaults were made of stones, but they were not very stable because if one stone became loose, then that kind of threatened the whole integrity of the structure. But with concrete, it was one continuous rock, like concrete fabric, so it was a lot, more stable with concrete. And also with concrete, the barrel vault was so strong, it was possible for Roman builders to place windows basically wherever they pleased. Whereas before, with stone masonry, or with solid stone masonry, basically they couldn't put windows in wherever they wanted to. So concrete really allowed them to place windows in the walls of the stone built, or the concrete barrel vault. And then buttressing is required on barrel vaults because of the downward and outward thrust of the heavy semicircular ceiling. So this really pushes down and out. So they had to put buttressing, which means that they just made the walls thicker all the way down on the vertical supports. And that helps with that force from the weight of this arch. And this is actually the buttressing area here. And you can see how thick it is because they're really trying to counteract the weight of that ceiling that's pushing down and out. So they just have to reinforce these walls. And that's called buttressing. So the groin vault, we'll move on to the groin vault. It's basically two barrel vaults intersecting at right angles. And the groin vault needs less buttressing than the traditional barrel vault. The groin vault's thrust is really concentrated along the groins, the lines where the two barrel vaults meet. So that's basically like right here on the other seams as well that run down. And so you can see some buttressing here where the walls are actually thicker. So buttressing is only needed at the points where the groins meet and the vaults. So the vertical supports here is where the buttressing is. And then more light is able to reach the interior of the groin vault, which is also a nice design feature. So if they really wanted a well-lit area, they could put in a groin vault and that would allow for more sunlight to reach the interior space. Groin vaults can be made with stone, but obviously concrete creates a continuous stone fabric that has unparalleled strength. So definitely superior construction technique using concrete as opposed to stone. So we can talk about, here's a sequence of groin vaults that they would actually put into buildings to kind of create an area where they could have almost like a clear story, but it allows that sunlight into the interior of the building. And then this is the hemispheric dome with an oculus. So a hemispherical dome is basically a round arch that has been rotated around a central axis. It's like you take an arch and you just rotate it around 360 degrees, I believe. And concrete domes can be opened up at their apex with a circular hole or oculus, which is, eye, the word eye, I believe, either in Roman or Greek, I'm not quite sure. And that enables light to reach the space within. And I'm not sure, actually, oculus might even be Latin or something, I'm not quite sure, but it means eye in whatever, eye. And that allows the light to come in and light the interior space. Okay, so we'll talk about man with portrait busts of his ancestor from Rome, Italy, late 1st century BCE, marble, 5 feet 5 inches high. So this is an older man, and older men from long distinguished bloodlines held the most power during this time in Rome, called the Republic, and these men were often the patrons of temples and various other works of art. And some were generals, and they used the spoils of war to finance public works, while others were wealthy aristocratic patricians, which were upper-class landowners. And the upper-class patrician class was very fond and proud of their lineage. And they actually kept portraits of their ancestors in wooden cupboards in their homes, and they would get them out and parade them around during funerals for their relatives, not necessarily ancestor worship, but something kind of close to it during this time. And so, like, your family really meant a lot back then, and obviously the wealthy patrician class ancestors, to them, the ancestors were a very important part of their lives, and these ancestor portraits of the upper class separated the patrician class from the plebeian or lower class people, and even from the new wealthy people in Roman society. So in Rome, if you had a long lineage of wealthy people in your family and you came from the patrician class, you were better than, say, a newly wealthy family that didn't have that long lineage and that good family name. So that was really important during the Republic times, that you had a good family name and lineage. So that's kind of where this comes from, this man with a portrait bust of his ancestors. So he's kind of showing off that he has this great bloodline, basically. So we'll talk about verism a little bit. That's kind of a term. And the subjects of these portraits are almost always men, and they're older men. And since they held the highest positions in society at this time, that's probably why. And they show them how they actually truly looked. And they're not idealized. They do not make them appear any nobler than they were in life. And these realistic portraits are described as veristic, which basically means super realistic. So if we use the term veristic, that's what we mean, or verism. It just means a realistic portrait of a person, and it's usually going to be an older man. So let's see what we have here. Okay, we still have some time. So here's a head of a Republican priest, 50 to 30 BCE. It's marble, 1 feet 2 5/8 inches high. This particular portrait bust, and bust really means from the neck, head, and sometimes the shoulders are included. This one shows one of an older patrician class man, and his face really shows his age. It shows he was a priest because he wears part of his toga over his head, which is something that priests did, kind of like a hood. And this is how priests commonly wore their togas. So that tells us that he was probably a priest. And art historians debate whether these Republican veristic portraits are truly records of individual features or maybe exaggerated types designed to make a statement about the personality. Serious, experienced, determined, loyal to family, state, which happened to be the most admired virtues during the Republic. So they were really, these older men that had, long family lines. They were serious, determined, experienced, and those were what was really important during this time. So here's a portrait of a Roman general from the sanctuary of Hercules, Tivoli, Italy, 75 to 50 BCE, marble, 6 feet 2 inches high, so it's over life size. So common practice in Roman portraits was to just show the bust of a person, and they believed showing the face was enough to show the character of the person. And this is in contrast to ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, they thought portraits really needed to be full length for including the body, because the body was very important in Greece. And this particular portrait is of a Roman general from the sanctuary of Hercules in Tivoli, and it's made of marble, much like the full-length statues from Greece, and it features the common veristic or hyper-realistic head on an idealized body. So you can see his aged face does not match his youthful body, and we have seen this in other statues, maybe in Egypt. And the body was molded after the statues of Greek athletes and heroes, so he has a very Greek body, and the Romans admired Greek sculpture, and you can see Greece's influence in the perfect body of this statue. And this looks a little goofy to us, but it might be an attempt for the artist to show different aspects of this general's personality. And so, maybe he's very wise, but also strong, so they're trying to show that with, his wise face and his strong, youthful body, potentially. But anyway, we have seen this in other cultures, and Rome is doing this as well. And we will pick back up in the next video.